Hey folks, welcome to Snowpal Podcast. Our guest today is Gaurav Verma. Gaurav is the Chief Marketing Officer at Kanerika. Gaurav is a technologist turned marketer and has worked for blue chip companies in early stage startups and is currently helping Kanerika scale. Gaurav, thanks for taking the time to chat.
Oh, thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm excited.
My pleasure. Before we get started, right, I'll just socialize the topic really quickly with our audience, and then if you could just give a brief intro about yourself and your company, and then we can roll into the topic. But here's the loosely defined topic that we'll be chatting about for the next 45 minutes to an hour. How to help early stage companies scale inbound engine. So we'll talk about that particularly with limited budget. And we'll also talk about marketing leadership and what it takes to build global slash remote teams, right? Those are the loosely defined topics, and we'll just see where it takes us. So, with that said, Gaurav, do you want to give a quick intro about yourself and your company?
Yeah, so I'm responsible for running marketing and also the ISR team for Kanerika. And Kanerika is a premier data AI and automation company. We are a Microsoft partner, Snowflake partner, and also Databricks partner. And we have a bunch of AI agents and diving deeper into agentic AI as we speak. Yeah, I've been Oh, yeah, that's the website, and we are actually going to do a rehaul of the website. We are attending FabCon at Las Vegas, so we are looking forward to that and talking to a lot of customers that way. Yeah.
Perfect.
So yeah,
Sorry. I think that's a good intro. Thank you very much. And we'll learn more about you, your work, and the company, as we progress through this conversation, Gaurav. So just to kick us off, one of the things you had mentioned was, you're passionate about, marketing in general, but more specifically, how to help early stage companies scale through inbound engine, right? So can you give us an introduction to what excites you about this? What does it mean to, help these early stage companies scale? And you also mentioned with limited budget. So we'll start there. We'll talk about what some of the challenges are, what works, what doesn't work, and then see how it goes.
yeah, it's been quite a journey with Canerica for the past couple of years. Started off as a VP of marketing there, and built the team from scratch essentially in India. And with limited experience in the overall marketing side, I was actually kind of, um, I would say, flying the plane while I was building it, because my main experience in marketing was product marketing. But what I actually brought to the table was a very curious mind, and also a first principles thinking approach and rapid experimentation mindset. So with that and a will to get things done, right? I was given this charter of, hey, we have this brand called Kanerika. It's been there for about 8 years or so. We want to grow the brand. Okay. And by the way, you don't get a lot of budget at all. Okay. So what do we do? So obviously, first we try to fix, social and a lot of things that are broken. It was kind of like whack-a-mole early days. I still feel it's a bit of whack-a-mole nowadays, but it's like at a different level, right? So and then I was learning SEO, as I was trying to run marketing and trying to fix brand, create useful assets for sales team. Try to first of all say what do we stand for. We are a data and AI company, so kind of build the pitch deck, sales collateral. Actually we redid the website in record time and also at a pretty cheap price. So we actually went with WordPress, and so that was, I would say, phase one, right? And then phase two was, okay, so what do we want to do next? We want to scale content, and what do we write about? So what I realized is a few themes actually work very well for companies to talk more about their services. One is problem slash solution kind of content, right? Or content that talks about use cases, technology, and industries. Everyone has this, everyone can talk about this. Like Snowpal can talk about this too, right? And then you have the useful tools or free tools that you can make. So for example, we came out with the AI assessment tool, or we have the ROI calculator tool for data migration. That's of quite use to a bunch of people. We also have some free AI agents that we um, promoted, and we get MQLs and people's contacts from that. So that's another section. Another section is comparisons. This versus that. For example, Snowflake versus Databricks, or Fabric versus Databricks. Cloud versus OpenAI, OpenCloud versus Accomplished, or stuff like that. So a bunch of people are interested in that. Then there's jobs to be done slash technical documentation, right? A bunch of, a lot of roles, business people slash technology people are interested in these kind of narratives or these kind of articles. Um, and of course, there's thought leadership and all that. So having these different buckets of content, and learning a lot from the competitors, in the sense, monitoring their websites. What are they talking about? What does their sitemap look like? What keywords are they targeting? And nowadays, with the advent of MCP, or Model Context Protocol, for SEO platforms like SEMrush and Data for SEO, you can just have like a good prompt and figure out, hey, competitor one, what are the top 100 keywords that you're ranking for? Which of them are commercial that we don't rank for, that are easy for us to actually write on and try to rank for? And then, hey, let's get eyeballs on those and try to convert that into a specific kind of a content machine, right? So this is the kind of level of thinking that has actually kind of unfurling. It's been unfurling in my mind, and I'm trying to scale it with AI and scripting as much as possible, because hey, I do come from the technology background. In fact, a fun fact about me is, my first job in Tata Consulting Services, I wrote a script using awk and Unix scripting, which basically looked at the code in Oracle Forms and gave a report saying, "Hey, this code doesn't look good here. You didn't follow the coding standards here, and whatnot." And fast forward now, I see there are AI companies who do exactly the same thing, but with AI. Okay, so some things don't change. But anyhow, that technology bug has been with me, and I'm trying to use that to make the marketing workflows more intelligent and more efficient and much more predictable.
Amazing. There's a lot to unpack there. I was going to make notes, but sometimes when I make notes, Gaurav, I forget to capture all of the points that the speaker is making. So I have to draw a balance. If you hear me type something, it's because I'm capturing some notes there. So plenty to unpack there. Let me start from the very last thing that you said. Not really a question, but you mentioned awk. I've used it quite a bit actually, and I do use it even today, even for basic like commands that I run on Mac, for instance, on the development environment. But I haven't heard someone mention it in a long while, so I'm glad actually. I'm glad to hear someone say that. But to switch to everything that you said under the in the space of marketing, right? Some very high level questions. You beautifully bucketed a number of things there, correct? I'm not going to recall all of them, but I know what you said there, right? You had a number
Mhm.
of different buckets as to what you're targeting. But
Mhm.
before I ask you reasonably specific questions, hopefully meaningful ones, couple of high level questions to understand not so much your background, I think I have a good sense for it, but your company that you're currently representing, right? Kanerika. Is that and just for me to sort of get context to my questions so I can make them more contextual, is the company a consulting organization, Gaurav, or is it a product company?
Yeah, we get that a lot. So we are primarily as consulting and services company, but we have products of our own. We also have a proprietary data operations platform, which is AI powered. It's called Flip, FLIP, and it basically helps move data from between systems, but in an intelligent manner, right? And it has a lot of different applications. So you could use it for financial transactions reconciliation. You could use it for data migration. You could use it for verifying, data mappings before and after the migrations. You could also use it for invoice processing. So we definitely have IP in that space. We also have an AI agent called Carl, Karl, which is a data insights agent and can run on Microsoft Fabric in the cloud.
So is that an
And
agent that you use to make your work more efficient within the company, or is that an agent you're actually selling to your clients?
we are selling it to clients. Basically, Fortune 500 companies, anyone who has deployed Microsoft Fabric, or even without Fabric, right? It could be structured or unstructured data. So we have Carl, which is actually a structured data insights AI agent. And then we have Doc GPT, which is more unstructured. So think about in a corporate environment, you have videos, you have documents, you have, Slack channels and whatnot. It can extract all the interesting information from there and do visualizations and whatnot and do
Okay,
web
so
searches.
let me ask this because it's new to I would like to learn more about that. I'm sure our audience as well. So we are an API company, right? So that's we have other products, but one of the main things we focus on currently is essentially building APIs, and we
Mhm.
publish them on AWS Marketplace, or we license them directly if you want to run in your own infrastructure. We haven't yet started creating agents for other people to actually consume. But since you mentioned there a few high level questions, what does it mean to actually sell that agent? In other words, what is the monetization model for the agents that you do sell? You mentioned that agent that adds a certain amount of value, so you're selling it to these clients. How do they purchase that agent? Like how does I mean, is it licensed by use, or how does it actually work?
Yeah, it's they're available on the Azure Marketplace. So there's obviously the licensing SaaS option there for the software, but then there might be some services involved here in the beginning for the implementation as well. So
And
there's
if
both
the
aspects.
And
Yeah.
if the agent has dependencies on these models, do your clients have to pay or pick the model that's most relevant and pay by the model that they pick, or is it packaged in entirety so they just get the agent and it comes entirely
Yeah,
packaged as
so
one?
right, so the agent comes with the model, but then I guess it can run with Fabric or it can work with any kind of any other data, data warehouse or data environment that you have. And of course, the assumption is that you would already have a data infrastructure in place, either a structured one or an unstructured one, or it could be a combination of those, right?
Okay.
So we'll sell you the software, the subscription for that, and we'll also sell you the services that can go along with it.
Okay. And if at some point you want to do a demo of that, I'll be more than happy to let you do
Oh
a
yeah,
screen share,
absolutely.
Gaurav.
Yeah, sure. Why
Yeah.
not?
But let me switch to what I was going to ask earlier is okay, so you're a consulting organization, but you also have some product offerings that you're making, right? But let's focus on the consulting side of things, which I believe is predominantly, your main source of
Yeah,
revenue is consulting, I
right,
presume,
right.
right?
And now what we have done is we have we've come out with migration accelerators, right? It's a combination of software and services. So a lot of people are really looking to migrate from Informatica to Fabric, or from SQL, Microsoft SQL to Fabric, or it could be SAP Crystal reports, and these are a couple of these are like end of lines. So some of the people are really looking for options. So we provide canned migration paths, and the products that we have really come up with are kind of based on our earlier consulting experience. And now we've seen that there's a good templated offering that we can offer to a bunch of
No, no, I think that's
customers.
perfect. So what I can
Yeah.
do is that I've gotten context there. We are going to talk marketing, but unfortunately or fortunately for me, we are going to talk some consulting as well, Gaurav, because I haven't had very many people show up on the podcast that represent a consulting organization. It's mostly people who are running product companies and startups and whatnot. But I have an interest, and I think a lot of people have an interest in learning about the future of consulting, right? So I think I have the right person to pick your brain here to the extent that I can, or you allow me to. So let's talk again. And switching gears to consulting for a moment, feel free to have me switch back to marketing as well. The reason I'm asking that is right, as a consulting company, I have a few different questions. you said you have several ways to do inbound marketing, right? You different ways of creating this content. Now, the very first fundamental question I have is a lot of what people learn. You mentioned, technical documentation, right, where people learn differences between technologies and whatnot. Are people looking to go to a company's website to discovering those types of things? Or is the idea that you publish rich content that's different from content that's probably found elsewhere? That when people are doing a search on Google or maybe are going to, I don't know, ChatGPT and asking questions, that it starts referencing documentation that you do create. And if that's the case, how does it work? Because the search engine optimization is, I mean, SEOs have been around for a long time, but that is changing, right? Now we're talking about what is answer engine optimizations, Gen and AI engine optimizations, and there's no dearth of those acronyms there. So the way people are discovering companies and content and whatnot is nothing like how they had done in the past. So what does it mean for you as a company or somebody as a leader who's defining the marketing direction? How are you needing to do things differently because the traditional way is not working? Or you might also tell me, Krish, no, the traditional ways still do work, and maybe you don't have to make as many changes. I just want to get your thoughts on where it is at and where you think it's going.
Yeah, my LinkedIn feed is full of people, especially around the end of the new year, right? End of the earlier year. It was full of people saying, "Hey, long live SEO. SEO is dead, or long live AEO, and rest in peace and stuff like that." So there's this debate between SEO versus AEO versus GEO versus search everywhere optimization instead of search engine optimization. Um, has been there for a while. But I think the answer is quite simple in my mind. It is definitely search everywhere optimization, as Neil Patel puts it also, right? Now, what does that mean? What that means is the traditional way is definitely not dead. Good SEO is a foundation for good AEO. Okay. And so you want to ideally do good in every aspect. 50% or 60% of the clicks that you used to get earlier are gone because what's happening is the AI overviews are just eating them up. So they're
Right.
referring your articles. They like your articles. They refer your articles. They take the wisdom from that
But
and
they're
they
not
will give you.
hyperlinking to those
Right.
pages
Yeah. I
anymore.
mean, they'll probably refer it in somewhere in the footnotes and say it'll show you the icons of the website it's referring, but it'll give you the distilled wisdom. And then the next step you're going to take is based on that distilled wisdom. So you're not going to visit their website at all, right?
Correct.
So you will lose out on 50 or 60% of the earlier clicks you used to get. So what do you do? I think you become very intentional about building long tail landing pages or very specific pages, and you want to focus on commercial topics. There are different type of intent topics. So you have the informational topics. That's great for engines, or even for people who want to actually go to the website and visit and get the information. There's transactional, there's navigational, and there's commercial. Usually we want to be for bottom of the funnel, for actually getting people to in the door for demos and consulting meetings and all that. It's usually the commercial topics that we want to go after, right? But I think a healthy mix between informational and commercial is needed. Usually 70-30 mix kind of sort of works. If you can make it 60-40, that's even better. Right now, I think we are at 70-20-25 or something like that, with the five remaining in some other bucket. Um, so that's that. And the other thing I want to mention, Krish, is that YouTube is the second largest search engine.
Right.
So Google, the way it works is kind of funny, right? Of course, they keep changing the algorithm, and it gets interesting all the time. But they look at different signals across platforms, across channels. And of course, Google owns Google search engine, and Google also owns YouTube. So guess how the two work? I mean, obviously they work very well together. So you want to do well on YouTube, you want to do well on TikTok, you want to do well on Reddit. You also want to, hell, one of my big plans is to actually get on Wikipedia. if I can manage it, right? Which means I just need to have enough notability, third party independent mentions of Kanerika or the founders or the leadership or what we have been up to. And that takes little bit of time, and it takes a little bit of budget to reach out to journalists and have them interested in us and do an independent coverage. So this is a journey, right? It's not anymore about just SEO. It's not about, hey, we are ranking on so many keywords, and no, it's about how much traffic you're getting now, because 60% of that traffic is, it's getting eaten away by AI. It's about topical authority. Okay, so you can write, but how much topical authority do we have, right? And so that becomes a huge factor. And
So
then
there, so
yeah.
Gaurav, sorry, there's so many interesting things that you mentioned there. So I'm going to try and remember as much as I can. Um, Okay, you mentioned SEO. You mentioned, the split between, that a good SEO is going to lend itself to good AE or
Mm-hmm.
GEO. For instance, you talked about, 60% of the search, the results being returned through in AI on AI mode. So meaning
Mm-hmm.
people are not necessarily clicking on those hyperlinks, even though there's a source reference. Not
Yeah.
everybody is going to notice that, but at least it's there. And then you also
Mm-hmm.
talked about the nature of content that you end up having to publish, right? Last but not least, you mentioned the different platforms. You mentioned, Google. You mentioned YouTube as the second largest search engine. You mentioned TikTok and a few other distribution platforms. But here is my follow-up question to you. And this is, I had a chat with somebody recently, and she mentioned something along these lines as well. So the question is a collective question based on my recent learnings, which is you mentioned limited budget, so please keep that in mind, right? Just keep that in mind. But you also mentioned a number of different distribution platforms, right? You mentioned Reddit. There's YouTube videos that you have to create, and then there's Instagram or Reels, TikTok, vertical videos. Different aspect ratios, different length, maybe short form content, long form content, audio and video, creating documentation, technical documentation, other kinds of documentation, comparisons, giving people introduction to technologies. And there's no end to this really, right? And I can speak to it personally as a startup. We have a few different products and we want to focus our energies on just that, Gaurav. As a developer, when I started the company, that's all I knew. Over the years, I've had to learn other things that I would rather not learn sometimes, right? Because it's not my cup of tea. But it's been genuinely overwhelming because it's on one side, you're like, hey, let's stick to just one distribution platform, do a phenomenal job there, right? Sure, that's one way to go about it. But unfortunately, people consume the same content in seven different ways. And you can't go educate people because it's not your job and it's not for them to accept the way you are serving content as well. If Gaurav likes TikTok, Gaurav's going to watch TikTok. If Krish likes Reels, Krish is going to like Reels. If somebody else likes YouTube Shorts, they might use that, correct? So you cannot, the question I have many, the first of them, Gaurav, is can you really pick and choose between these distribution platforms? Because I don't even know how you would pick and choose because each one's good in its own way and it's got its own users and user base. Or do you have to somehow duplicate the content that you have or replicate whatever the right word is across these distribution platforms, as painful and laborious and boring sometimes as it is that the only way to go? What are your thoughts on these challenges and
Yeah.
what do you recommend?
Yeah. So very pertinent question. Fortunately, with a little bit of creative thinking, you can significantly reduce your work while also getting good returns, I would say. So first of all, what kind of content works well across platforms? I would say video. Vertical short form video, short videos, shorts definitely work well. Now, as a B2B company, will you be able to cater to all audiences in all platforms? No, you won't be. So, which platforms are going to matter to you? I think the ones that are going to matter to you are LinkedIn, Instagram, um, and then YouTube, right? YouTube Shorts. Those three are definitely going to. And then the video that they actually make can work for all three of those, right? So what you want to do is have an interweaving pattern of publishing some content that you create, and that has to be obviously relevant. So what that means for us is, and my mandate to the marketing team has been, hey, let's try to publish some hacks. First of all, let's do shorts, let's do vertical videos, and let's do hacks. So data hacks, AI hacks, migration hacks. If you can just do that, right? If you can just do that and hold the attention of the audience, that's it.
Okay, Gaurav, I'm going to interrupt you there because I have some genuine questions. You mentioned Reels, you mentioned YouTube Shorts, right? So let's take those as a couple of different platforms. Now, in terms of consumption, right? And here, all of these are genuine questions, genuine meaning they're not manufactured, they're real problems we are running into, say, at Snowpal, or I've known other product companies run into similar issues as well, regardless, no matter the size. When you're watching reels, right? You're coming back home after a day at work, whether you're working remotely or commuting to work. People are exhausted. They take their phones out. They want to sort of while away their time, right? You time box, hopefully. Otherwise, reels is endless, right? I mean, you can sit there like for 10 hours and then you regret sitting there not doing anything more productive. Let's say the time you're actually going to be spending there. Are you looking to learn more, or are you looking to get a break from your routine? Let's say I spend 10 hours a day at Snowpal doing a ton of engineering related stuff. When I pick up my phone and I go to Reels, I'm not sure if I'm looking to learn about models, Claude Cowork, and things of that nature. I'm looking to, I don't know, see my favorite dancer dance for like 30 seconds or somebody sing, correct? So that's my first question. Are people actually consuming technical content on these platforms?
I think what's happening is the technology is moving so fast that they are not so much caught up, right? And especially in the technology space, like a lot of these people, they just spend the day in the firefighting or spending meetings. I have a friend, he works for a network company here, and he works weekends. I'm like, why are you working weekends? Are you getting overtime? Like, no, I just my entire day is spent in meetings. I just don't have time to think. Like, okay, so when will I get real stuff done? So I think that's and I have the example of my wife. She's kind of a workaholic too. With all due respect, she's done well and everything. I wish her well, but I think ideally people should carve out some time for doing actual work and also learning in their daytime. They just don't, right? So they come back, and I think they want to do both things, right? So some of them want to learn, some of them just want to like just be very light and just give me a story that endears me. I want to see something wonderful. I want to see something very light. I want to feel good. I want to feel happy. So those things are definitely there, and as you said, they time box themselves. Um, but the audio, I think over time, as a business, what do we want? We want to build an audience that wants to learn something, wants to interact with our brand, and wants to follow us.
Okay.
And then here's the other thing. I was just watching someone else talk about who built a huge audience on social media, and he's like, you will never make everyone happy. You will never make everyone happy. All you have to do is just keep producing the content that you want to produce, and then the right kind of audience will come around you. That's it.
Okay, fair enough, right? So let me ask you now, as a product company, right? Here are some of the questions that we almost always have, and we try to divvy them up to the extent that we can. We create technical content, right? I mean, we do a podcast, we do hands on podcast sessions, and a number of other things in that space of being highly technical. We do high level create high level content as well, conversations with distinguished guests such as yourself to talk about a variety of different topics that relate to software engineering, correct? Sometimes it's coding, sometimes it's testing, sometimes it's deployment, sometimes it's security, sometimes it's cybersecurity, sometimes it's marketing, but regardless, it relates to running the company, right? What it takes to run a company, an engineering software company. But I've noticed that, Gaurav, and you might have seen this too, right? It takes a lot of time to create a lot of this rich content. It's not, no matter what tools you have available, it's still not easy. If you have to make it original, you don't want ChatGPT to write all the articles because then nobody's going to read it essentially, right? So you're going to have to have your human intervention so it actually creates that level of separation. So not everybody can regenerate the exact same piece of content. Same to a video as well. But we've noticed that, I've done a mini podcast, not formal ones here on this channel, but on other places that I do videos, sounding frustrated in with a tiny bit of humor, if you will. Because I created this, I did a 2 hour session on some technology I want to review that I had never used before. So I did a recording and then I published it. Let's say you have a certain number of people who watch it, hopefully engage on LinkedIn, for instance. But you publish other platforms, I mean, you're not talking millions of views necessarily, right? And then there was a parallel video that showed up, and this person actually took their camera. They actually went to a Costco, right? I mean, I'm not a Costco shopper, but I know Costco. I've been there before. Uh, they go there, and this I'm not even making this up. I promise you, this is real video that I actually did see. Either it was in Texas or on the West Coast somewhere. They go to a Costco, they pick up this camera, and they're walking around the aisles, picking every product that's an Indian product per se, right? They would just pick it off the shelf and then show the product on camera, then tell what the price is, right? And then put the product back on the shelf. Now, I mean, to each their own. I'm not making a comment on that particular video, but I cannot not make a comment either. And here is what I mean by that. So I was like, okay, I don't understand this content because I can go to Costco.com and look up the products. And why am I spending like 30 minutes? It was like a long form 30-minute video on YouTube. Why am I going to watch this video where somebody's going to Costco? I mean, it's not like a fancy place, or I mean, just a store, like a grocery store or something of that nature, right?
Yeah, but I think what's happening here is that you're getting this personalized tour, right? In-person tour, a virtual tour of a Costco experience, and for the products that you, as someone from India, might be very interested in actually buying, or someone with your persona, right? So you might be like, oh, that's interesting. I
And
never
yeah,
thought of it
no.
like
So
that
I was
way.
going to ask you a question there. Sorry. The last thing I'm going to say there is it had like 4 million views within like 24 hours or something.
Oh, wow.
And here I'm thinking, maybe I should
Yeah.
not worry about creating technical content, right? Why am I reviewing Agent Force for like an hour and a half and racking my brains on doing that stuff? Maybe I should just go to Wegmans and create this video. I say this in a lighter vein, but my question to you, Gaurav, is how do you size up what people want to consume? Sometimes the most ridiculous content, at least in my opinion per se, right, seems to garner the most number of views. So how do you draw the balance between entertainment and information and education when you want to create content? When Gaurav is defining the terms of engagement from a marketing standpoint, how does Gaurav divvy up entertainment? How does Gaurav allocate a chunk to education, to information, and yada yada yada? I'd love to hear your thoughts on.
Yeah, so I think for TikTok, which is mostly for Gen Zs, so they don't use Google that much. They actually use TikTok for searching. And so for there, I think you can have more feel-good videos. You can also have something more insightful stuff there. Hacks. I think everyone loves hacks. And then
When you
for
say
print,
hacks, Gaurav, what's an example? Is it mostly like, hey, if you go to, I don't know, go to Excel or Google Sheets, here's something you can do quickly, is that kind of stuff? Or like, what would be a decent example of a hack there?
yeah, for example, one of the AI hacks would be that, hey, did you want to actually search your all your videos for specific information? And was this an issue for you? You know what? You can do that with DocGPT. So that's a
Okay.
hack, right?
Okay.
And it has to be, and I would say the less AI you can be about it, the more engagement you're probably going to get,
Okay.
right? Because right, the less AI you actually show to real people, or at least you can make it very realistic, the more engagement you're going to get eventually. The other thing is people are very visual. So we use Pinterest a whole lot. So we use something called napkin.ai. Napkin.ai is one of the most amazing, I would say, solutions out there for making visual infographics. And you can make it branded. You just put your logo on top of it. And we've been using a bunch. And that actually drives a bunch of impressions also. Because people go to Pinterest for visual inspiration, right? And so that'll get you some traffic, that'll get you more impressions. And when you put them on the blogs also, by the way, it gets picked up by Google, for Google likes to put it on their indexed images, right? um, So yeah, so there's like bunch of things out there. Hacks. So yeah, hacks. It's got to be a combination of hacks and something interesting. So on Instagram, we also try to do something, employee rants, right? Employee rants or something around
So
maybe boyfriend, girl,
that would come in the category of entertainment, so to speak, then, right?
right? Or office culture or some one of those, right?
Okay, so just to summarize before we switch gears to the next topic, there's a number of things you've shared with us here. Thank you for that. A number of different tools and approaches. But if I had to summarize this, tell me if this is a decent way to summarize, Gaurav. There is no single silver bullet type of distribution platform. You mentioned TikTok, you mentioned Pinterest, you mentioned LinkedIn, you mentioned YouTube, you mentioned Instagram. You've pretty much said all the
Yeah, you
popular
can't,
ones out
and
there.
but you can't also do all of them, right? So that is one of your earlier questions. What can you do within a limited resources? If I were a B2B brand, I would pick LinkedIn and I would pick YouTube.
Okay.
That's it. That's it.
And
That's
with
what I would do.
YouTube, you said mostly shorts, not the long form content.
The reason is shorts get a bunch of views.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's going to cost you less to make shorts. It's going to
Okay.
cost you like you can use Hagen. Hagen is pretty amazing nowadays, right? You can have the right kind of human incantation, and they have a bunch of voice avatar, voice flavors and whatnot. Um, you can also
Okay.
make your own avatar. So that's another thing that we've been doing for some of our leaders, right? So for Chief Revenue Officer Bhupendra Chopra, who's also the co-founder, we started with his AI avatar. Then we have another AI avatar for Amit Chandak, who's the Chief Analytics Officer and also a Microsoft MVP for Fabric. And it's been working well. It's been working well. Now what we've done is we kind of graduated towards a more personal photo shoot, a real photo studio, a video studio, if you would call it, in the Kanerika premises in Hyderabad. And we're going to produce more podcasts and leadership series. So when we first started, we I mean, I was like, coming back to the topic of budget, right? We had pretty much had zero budget. What are you going to do with zero budget? Turns out you can still do a lot. So turns out you can still do a lot because you can do a podcast, right? So go to podbean.com. Podbean gives you like 30 podcasts for free, or like you can keep whatever, right? So there's like a free tier, and that's pretty good enough for getting started. Um, you can use Notebook LM for just Notebook LM will give you a great podcast, right? You have a great blog, just use Notebook LM. You'll get a podcast. Just do some validation, clean it up a little bit, publish it up. And then, so now we get about 30, 40 downloads a month. We get thousands of impressions on Pinterest. Pinterest, we napkin costs like $200. That's it. And you get like a bunch of generation options. We use it on website. We use it on Pinterest, um, and also YouTube videos, right? So Hagen is pretty useful for us. Um, yeah,
I think,
I, yeah.
everything you've said there, Gaurav, really appreciate it because you've been very specific with your answers. And so it's going to help not just me at Snowpal, it's going to help our viewers, listeners and watchers, sort of take what you've said there, look up those technologies, those products that you've mentioned, and then roll from there. Before we wrap this topic and go to the next part, which is consulting, right? The very last thing I want to ask you is, um, if you could ballpark it, say you have a 40 hours a week, right? Let's say you've got one person, right? Just in terms of, as engineers, a lot of us think in terms of numbers and we try to make things quantitative, right? Even things that cannot be quantified, you have this urge and inertia to quantify it so you can actually understand it. So I try to just think in that fashion. So I'm going to take 40 hours. I'm going to give you 40 hours, right? One resource, and you're running say a consulting slash product company, right? A software company. You've got just one resource, right? And they have 40 hours a week. Um, they're going to
But
have
what kind of
to.
what kind of skill set does
Oh,
that
no, yeah,
resource
no, no.
have?
I'm just going to give you, you can make a bunch of assumptions, right? It's a very hypothetical scenario. Let's say that person is the jack of all trades, correct? You just have that
Aha.
one person, correct? Now,
Mm-hmm.
what they have to do is they have to sort of understand the business that you're trying to, the problems you're trying to solve. They have to play the role of a product manager. they have to play the role of an architect and then a developer, and then write some code, use whatever tools to generate code and write the rest of it, do some testing, deploy it, make sure it's secure from an engineering standpoint, and then do some marketing inbound, maybe do some sales outbound, and everything else that you need to run a company, correct? You've got only one person and they've got 40 hours a week. If you had to break that down by the different roles in their organization, correct? Let's say Krish is the only person you have. Sorry, right? You just have Krish for a week. How much time am I spending on marketing? Is it 2 hours a week versus five? Because if I spend five, I've got 35 left to do the rest of it, right? How might you, and this is very important for a lot of us to understand. So I would love to hear your thought. Again, this is a super ballpark, hypothetical scenario, right? 40 hours and one resource, and they've got to do all of this. And you're going to assume that they have all the skills, obviously, to do all of these things. How would you break their week down in terms of the number of hours they have to spend in 2026, given all the tools that are available, right? And I'll just end this question with one last thing, which is if I had asked this question to you 2 years ago, engineering or development may have gotten a little bit more time because you had to write every line of code. Now, who's writing every line of code, right? Not anybody that I know of. So things are moving a little bit quicker there. So the developer has more time available. So maybe that time could be used for something else, right? So given that as a background, Gaurav, how might you take the 40 hours and divvy it up?
I would, yeah. I would. I'm going to quote one of the CEOs that I just talked to. He said he's shipping 70% of the code with cloud code. Okay, so rhymes with what you said about the efficiency around coding and shipping. With that said, I think if you just have one person,
No, one person is just an example because I'm just saying I can
right,
extrapolate that to 100 people. I just want to say if you had 40 hours, how would you divvy that up?
right. So I would first of all uh, I would put a lot of premium on asking the right questions.
You better give 35 hours to developers, otherwise I'm going to be upset with you all right. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah. So please go ahead and divvy it up. I
So
would
yeah,
love
so
to
I
hear.
think I think before I even break down that 40 hours, I'm going to give a lot of weightage to asking the right kind of questions and putting on different hats. And I think um, if you don't have the experience in different domains in marketing or product management or as an architect or as a salesperson or as a branding person or as a coding, right? No, you cannot. Usually, it's hard to get all that. But assume you don't have it. So I think I would actually dedicate maybe 10%, 15% to shadowing a bunch of thought leaders, actively scanning the market as to what's happening out there, what is the best out there.
Okay,
Doing
6 hours,
information.
right? Six
Yeah,
hours to just keep myself up to date with
yeah,
what's happening,
right.
correct? Which
So,
because
so you
Google
have
gives
that.
you a day a week, but you're giving 6 hours, that's great. So we got
So
34 left. Yeah.
So you got that. Then I think you're talking to, so once you know what you want to build, what are your customer. So I think you want to definitely dedicate 20% towards product management. And then
So this is all the percentages are on the root number, right? So I'm going to take from 40 hours there. So
yeah.
8 hours to product management, 6 hours to educating yourself and keeping in touch with the market. So we've got 14 hours used up. We got 26 left.
And then I would divide the rest between marketing, architecture, and then coding, right? So product management would be
No, we're
the
done
so
with product management, right? So the rest is you said
yeah.
marketing, in development, and what is the third? Sorry.
So and then coding and shipping, right? So the actual development and then architecture. So I think that's one bucket, and then marketing, and then
Okay.
product, and then of course sales. So I don't know if there's a bunch of
Okay,
sales
let's take
operations.
three. Let's take three to make it easy, right? Let's
Yeah.
say we've got 24 hours left. We've got to do
Hmm.
sales, marketing, and engineering. By engineering, I mean development, architecture, testing, DevOps, the whole gamut, right? So let's say you
Hmm.
have to break down the other 24 hours, Gaurav, under these three categories, these three buckets of sales, marketing, and engineering. How would that breakdown look like?
I think I would probably spend more time on the sales aspect on the outbound than probably marketing, and then remaining I
No,
would
like a
kind of
number, some
okay,
number.
like a number, right? Yeah, so instead of 30, 30, 30, I would probably give 40% to sales. I would probably give um, you know another 30% to marketing, or 25% to marketing, and the rest to development. Assuming that the development is so efficient that you can actually
So hang
make
on,
it
this is
happen.
very interesting. This is very
Yeah.
interesting. You're going to upset a bunch of us developers, okay? So out of the 40 hours, the breakdown, a lot of a good chunk, initially 6 hours went to researching, keeping in touch
Yeah.
and tune with what's happening out there in the world, which is a good thing, right? Healthy knowledge and awareness. You gave another X number of hours to product management, which is about 8 hours, I think. And then you said you're going to give more to sales, a little bit lesser to marketing, and you had 20% left, right? So out of the 5 day week here, Gaurav, have we come to a point in 2026 at the time of this recording that one day of the week is good enough to actually write software for a
No.
software company?
No, so I'll tell you what, you can, here's what I'm going to do. I think the assumption is you cannot paralyze here. You should paralyze. Should totally paralyze and do things so while you're doing sales, while you should be doing coding and you should be doing shipping, right? So I think that's the key. One person can totally knock this out. There are going to be a few things where your full attention is going to be needed, right? But otherwise, why do you need your full attention? You could be doing your marketing research, but you could also be doing your sales operations. Here's your lead list enrichment, and all you need to do is really focus on the key things, that making sure it works, making sure that the right things are set up, and then let it go and let it do its job, right? So I don't think there's like I don't think it's very sequential, because it's not.
Okay,
So I think with that mindset, you can make it happen.
makes sense. The last thing I want to ask you there, you said more time, relatively speaking, to sales compared to marketing. Now, as a company where we do obviously do prospecting on LinkedIn, we don't nearly spend as much time as we should. It's been part of our problem as well. We tend to spend relatively more time on marketing to make it inbound, even though that's much slower. It takes a lot more time for things to happen. That's where we've leaned. Doesn't make it right, but I'm just curious to know why you said you would actually allocate a little bit more time towards sales compared to marketing.
I said that maybe initially you would want to do that, but once your sales motions are set, you probably want to, when you want to scale your marketing content or marketing engine, that's when you might want to actually, keep it a little bit flex between the both buckets. And I initially said that because you do have to spend a bunch of time in making sure that you are reaching out, you're doing the segmentation right, you're doing the proper enrichment, you're setting up the right tools, right? You have to have a good outbound engine. So I think initially you probably want to do that. Initially you also want to do that for the marketing engine, right? So I think those two buckets, they can be little bit flexible
Okay,
in
makes
terms of
sense,
the
right?
allocation.
This is
Yeah.
amazing, right? What you've shared here is phenomenal. Now we can switch to, unless, do you have anything to ask me related to this before we go to consulting as the next topic, Gaurav?
I'm good. Let's go to the next topic. Yeah.
Okay, the next one's no less interesting to me, right? And we're talking about this at an interesting point of time. I'm going to share my learnings. Please humor me for a couple of minutes, and then I'll ask you the questions I want to ask you. Uh, in the last 6 to 8 months or so, right? Or even let's take 3 weeks ago, if I'm
Mm-hmm.
not wrong, I think when Claude released one of their models that had to do with a lot of areas that related to legal and
Mm-hmm.
HR and things like that, the IT market, particularly in India, the companies like TCS, Wipro,
Mm-hmm.
Cognizant, and all of
Mm-hmm.
these large IT consulting companies. I mean, for folks who don't understand these companies, these are large IT consulting organizations that run out of India essentially, right? They're
Mm-hmm.
headquartered in India, and some of them have listings in the U.S. Stock market as well. Now, they plunged, I think, I want to say over 10%, and I was not
Mm-hmm.
surprised. I was not surprised because I thought it was in the coming, and it's happened to consulting companies in the U.S. as well.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here is my fundamental question to you, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
many facets to this question, but before, just to get us into the topic, 4 years ago, 3 years ago, you there was this need, a lot more need for consulting, because it took quite a bit of time and money to build software, to write software. Not the case anymore, right? Not the case anymore. With the AI has had a significant impact on primarily white collar jobs, right? It hasn't
Hmm.
gone after blue collar jobs, not just as yet. Unlike the
Yeah,
industrial
a bunch of
revolution,
bunch,
right?
bunch of DIY options now. Yeah, for sure.
Right? So now, where I've been talking to founders of startups, Gaurav. I talked to somebody I think is based out of Sydney. He said he had 50 people in the team. Now he has like 7 people, right? So they were able to let go of 80% of the company. We've seen AWS having plenty of layoffs. IBM had layoffs. I think Oracle's announced a ton of layoffs lately as well, right? These are product companies that generally pretty stable, right? They're not depending on other clients to run their businesses. They have their own products per se. Now, switching to consulting, what do you, I mean, I have a number of questions in the space, but what do you think is the initial impact? I mean, is consulting doomed in the sense that, hey, you know what, we need only 10% of the engineering workforce. So you don't need the 90% of the other workforce that's even working in that space today. The second part of my initial question is, one of the reasons you outsourced, or when nearshoring or offshoring and whatnot, was primarily, to a large extent, to get the value of the dollar, right? Get the best bang for your buck. I mean, it's changed over the years as other countries have gotten more expensive. Hiring somebody in Bangalore now is maybe 1:2 ratio, or 1:3, maybe, if that. Earlier it was like 1:5, like a few years ago, right? So the economies of scale maybe is not turning out to be as exciting as it was before. Given what I've mentioned so far, first of all, do you agree with some of this, all of it, or none of
There's a
it?
big shift. Definitely a big shift happening on the company side. When they look at the productivity they can extract per employee with AI. Yes, it's real. Many jobs are being lost. It is real. But at the same time, many jobs are going to be redefined as well. Um, but yeah, there is this big question about what are a bunch of those people going to do. I mean, it's going to be a bunch of new founders or entrepreneurs or consultant or fractional employees. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is when it comes to consulting, how is that going to help or not going to help consulting? I think the way it helps consulting business is you can do more with less now, right? You can definitely ship more with fewer resources, and but you might still either you're going to reduce the price or you're going to do a bigger portion of the delivery, because now, hey, instead of option A, I could also do B and C as well. And you know what? Just to help you reduce your trouble, I'm going to lump in option A, B, C, and then I'll give you probably free training. The implementation is so much reduced, right? So I think those are some of the playbooks that some of the people are trying. Um, and when it comes to DIY, and is that a death knell for a bunch of consulting companies? Yeah, I think it's challenging, yes. But if you think about it, people want to buy from people. And what is consulting? Eventually, it's all about being a trusted partner. Do you expect a CIO or a CTO to spend a couple $1 million to just AI, or someone like to a smaller company who has no experience but has a lot of AI experience? No, right? I think they look for a lot of things. They look for what's your pedigree, are you part of a procurement? Are you approved as part of a procurement plan, right? Do you have reference customers? What's your history like? So those kind of things definitely still come to play. Are you a technology partner? Are you a featured partner? Blah blah. I don't think just having AI is like makes it or breaks it. It's still a lot of human to human transaction.
I think you said it beautifully, right? The convenience of getting something done by not doing it, if you can afford to get it done through somebody else, is not going away. Because if each of us has a particular skill and there's a business we want to be in, right? I mean, if you're, I don't know, if you're Ford Motor Company, they're in the business of making cars, right? I mean, IT is a cost center, which probably why I can imagine why they might end up outsourcing, whether nearshoring, offshoring, whatever it is, or to companies locally in the US. They may or may not want to have all of that knowledge in house. I mean, in my career, Gaurav, I've seen a fair share. I've worked mostly for product companies, I think exclusively, I think, but I've had consulting organizations engage with us. And when before we launched the product, our company and the product side of our company, we did managed services work for a little bit as well, right? So I appreciate that, but I can agree. I see what you're telling me there, right? Where things are changing, but there is also a need. Now, my follow up question to you here is like earlier, let's say about 4 years ago, 3 years ago, if I were representing a consulting company, which I was not, but let's say I were to wear that hat, I would say, you know what, Gaurav, you're the client, you've got some money, you want to build a web app, a mobile app, a microservice, whatever it is you want to build. You're going to tell me a business problem. I'm going to tell you how I can help you solve that problem, in what length of time, and how much it might cost. I might bring some credibility to the table, give you some examples of portfolios and what you've done in the past, and you're like, yeah, you know what, maybe you can help or maybe you cannot, right? That's sort of how the engagement went. I don't see that to be the case anymore, right? So, how do you think that engagement is going to look like today? In other words, if you have a project that you want to give to two managed services companies, and Krish represents one of those companies, what should I be doing differently from this other company outside of these other four things that I mentioned that you would, anyways, have to do credibility and technology and blah, blah, blah? What are some things that I could possibly tell you, or you might want to hear from me, that would seal the deal for me as a consulting company or a managed services company compared to this other firm that's also pitching for the exact same project?
I think it's all about how much do you know, how much about the prospect, right? How much research you've done, right? How much personalized the demo is, right? That makes a huge difference. Um, I've seen situations in which a smaller company is able to get a seat on the table just because they had a good demo compared to a much bigger player, right? Um, so I would say those sales engineers, they might be one of the breaking or make or break factor just because the guy put his neck on the line and did a kick-ass demo, um, and those things. So I think I really feel if there were some more AI related solutions out in the market for doing proper demos, that could be a good entrepreneurship opportunity also, because that's actually one of the pain points my friend tells me about, because he's actually a product specialist or a sales demo engineer, and he says there's so much tribal knowledge, these environments don't work, the product team does something, and it just breaks, and now I'm supposed to it's me on the line in front of the customer. I have to make this work. How do I make this work? This is my problem. So if there was some intelligent entrepreneur out there who could create an intelligent AI solution for this, I'm like, there's money to be made here.
Well, so in other words, so sales becomes not less important with everything that's happening. Based on what you're telling us here, Gaurav, sales becomes more important, right? In other words, uh, you know, again, a few years ago, if you were a non-engineering founder, you had only a couple of options to build software. You either had to go raise money and then, hope to raise enough money and then hire a team to help you build it, or I don't know, beg, borrow, or steal, find somebody who's an engineering co-founder and make them a partner and have them help you build it, right? But now, not so much, because you can wipe code your way to not just prototyping, but also to actually go live. Because I've talked to a lot of founders who've never written code, did not write a line of code in their current products as well, and then they've gone live, and they have some customers they've onboarded at this point of time, which means this differentiation is disappearing very soon. Meaning, Krish was a developer, somebody else was a developer, Gaurav was a developer. Each of us brought our software development acumen to the table and try to prove our mettle by solving algorithms and problems as quickly as we could. But that's not the way interviews happen anymore, right? Because all of us have access to the same set of tools that can generate code. So our skills have to change quite a bit, right? So that takes me to the next last leg of the conversation, which is, okay, we talked consulting, we talked a bunch about marketing and content creation and whatnot. What are some skills that, even if whether you're part of a consulting organization or part of like a product organization, right? What do you think is a holistic skill that you need to bring to the table? In other words, a second way to rephrase my question is, the way you hire somebody into your team, right? Whether it's a marketing team, or maybe your coworker is hiring somebody into the engineering team, or maybe a third coworker, your lead is hiring them into the sales team. What are the types of skills you're looking for? Because, and here's what I mean specifically by the question. I don't know if asking somebody Java programming questions or Ruby programming questions or Python programming questions, they never made sense to me because we are a polyglot shop. But that's how a lot of companies roll, right? Hey, have you worked on this particular language and that particular version? And can you help us do it? But that's not important anymore because you have to be a decent problem solver because the tool or the language or the technology does not matter. So I'm assuming even in your line of business, like in marketing in your departments, the way you hire somebody is probably changed. I mean, has it changed? If so, has it changed seismically? And if so, how has it actually changed?
Hiring is so personal, right? Because you have to work with this person. And in my previous roles, I've had bad managers. So as a leader, what I try to do is not be a bad manager. I can't guarantee that I haven't been a bad manager, but I try not to be a jerk. Okay.
Right.
Um, at the same time, the kind of person I am, I do have high expectations from myself and from the team. So the kind of person I really want to hire in the team has to be able to cope up with my thinking, right? And be able to challenge himself or herself and be open to new ideas and experimentation, right? Um, and also be very accountable, right? And also accountable and ensure results. When it comes to younger people or more inexperienced people, I usually go for like, what's your attitude? Do you have the good learning attitude? What's your aptitude for technology? Uh, is this a thinking person? Because I think intellectual rigor and intellectual thinking is so much important in this AI age. Everyone has the same tools, as like you mentioned. You don't ask the right question, don't give the right information, you're going to get not so great quality, right? There's so much AI, garbage in, garbage out, and so you're going to produce AI slop. See, so the bottom line is you want people who have a good head on their shoulders, who can run fast, who can do experimentation, right? Who are accountable, and eventually who can roll with you. So there's definitely that culture aspect, I would say. We've had people who were great at work, but they had people issues. I mean, even when I was earlier in my career, I made a bunch of mistakes myself, right? I didn't gel with a bunch of people, and it was to quite an extent it was a culture thing. They didn't understand me, probably I didn't understand them, whatever it was, right? But the culture aspect is important. At the end of the day, we have to work together. So that part is there. So I think that's my barometer, you know.
Okay,
Um, I,
so
I
Gaurav,
will say, if I may just mention a
go
couple of
ahead.
things. We did all this, and we still failed miserably with couple people. Still failed miserably with couple people, just because I think they weren't projecting themselves as to the real person that they were was very much not aligned with what they projected, right? So I think you can't, if you fake it, you're not going to make it.
Right. No, very no, all your points are very valid, right? I have no disagreements there. The question I have though is all of those were probably still valid points 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and 20 years ago. The follow-up specific question I have to you, Gaurav, is what are some things that you are looking for today, given where things are and how they are changing, AI and beyond? Compared to what you may have looked for. Everything you mentioned there is perfect, but that's something you may have looked for 2 decades ago as well. Are there things you can sort of share with us where things that might be specific to your needs, the way
Yeah,
you
so I
hired
think I think
today?
So I think three things I would definitely call out. The first thing is first principles thinking. You don't know anything, you figure it out. You got to have a figure it out mentality. Second is intellectual curiosity. A third is fail fast and experimentation. You got to have these three things. That's my, I would say, even in marketing, or any other discipline, even today, it's so much more important because things are moving very fast. You're not going to know everything. You're not going to know everything, right? So you have to ask the right questions. That's where the intellectual curiosity comes in, and the rest kind of follows, right?
No,
Yeah.
I think those are great points actually, right? Then they will stand the test of time essentially. I mean, I think you summarized that beautifully there. Um, okay, so we've covered a bunch of things, right? I have a couple more things to ask you, but I'm going to pause here and ask you if you have any questions for me. Because so far, my job's been easy, just throwing questions at you. And thanks for your patience in answering those. Now it's your opportunity, Gaurav. If you have anything that you want to ask me.
Yeah, I'd love to know what's been the your company's marketing journey and what are your pain points today?
Okay, I'm going to give you an answer, and please follow up with more questions as well. A quick background, right? When I graduated in India when I came here, I was like 21 or something, and I went to college here as well. I spent a lot of time studying marketing, right? I mean, I did an engineering degree, but it's still I did spend. I had like 11 electives. I think I did like 7 or 8 of them in marketing, right? I had a very my favorite professor back in college. And I thought, you know what? I read a lot of books, did a lot of projects, did everything. I'm like, Krish is going to be this amazing marketing person, right? I mean, nobody's going to beat him, right? Well, I came here. My first job happened to be in software programming, right? And then I fell in love with programming. So I completely forgot every bit of what I had learned back in college. When I launched our company many years ago, right? The product part of it, at least, right? Our first product is about 5 years old now, give or take, is when I really had to put those marketing skills, which I thought I had, Gaurav, to work. I was not surprised because, over the years, I'd realized that what you learn at school and college is only good, in my opinion, for what you have to do in school and college. The moment you step out of school and college, you've got to learn life all over again. Other than having a diploma that's a piece of paper and you can flaunt it to the extent that you want to, that it
Yeah,
doesn't
well,
add up.
hey, welcome to the real world, right?
Welcome to the real world, right? So that's what happened. So I said, okay, what should I do for marketing? And I had no idea. You know what I mean? I had, at least now after 5 years, whatever you're telling me, I can at least have the ability to understand what you're telling me. But if I had this conversation with you 5 years ago before we launched our product and our company, I would have had no clue whatsoever, right? So we had to learn and discover by failing repeatedly, more number of times than I want to even share here. So that's the first thing I want to say. And when we launched snowpal.com, the first product, I couldn't even go to Google and type snowpal because it doesn't pull up even the actual domain of the product, right? And it seems like a simple thing. I promise you, we spent a fair bit of time building that software. Nobody in the team ever asked, what happens after we go live? How are people going to know that we even exist? Because we kept thinking, Gaurav, that software programming or engineering was the most difficult problem. I mean, I'm not trivializing it. It's a fairly difficult problem even today with all the tools. It's not become
Yeah,
any
exactly.
easier.
This is the same thing, I was in marketing for so much time and I was in product marketing for so much time. But then there's a bigger world beyond that, right? There's demand generation, there's brand, there's PR and everything, and it all has to come together. So as for you as an entrepreneur, it's not, obviously going from a product person or a software engineer to how do I run this business? How do I get the word out? How do people know about this? How do I sell this?
And we do not appreciate the importance of all of the other roles in the, I mean, I knew they were all surely important, right? There's no question about that. But I would be lying if I told you that I knew the depth and importance of every role. And even when I talk to developers and architects and engineers who are working for other companies today, Gaurav, it's my opinion that they don't necessarily appreciate the importance of the other roles in the company, just not for any other reason, just because they've not done those jobs, right? And now, after having done this for 5 years now, I can tell you that what do I find as the most difficult thing? Is it coding? Is it architecting? Is it doing security work? Is it DevOps? Is it deployment? I mean, none of them is easy necessarily because there's a challenge every single day. There's like 10 different challenges. But at least I'm an engineer by profession, right? Some of it hopefully comes naturally, but everything else does not, right? Marketing is so difficult. Sales is incredibly difficult. I mean, being humble when you get on a conversation, when somebody's not showing an interest and your ego comes into play, these are things I learned by actually getting into those meetings, right? So for everybody who's out there, I tell them that in your lifetimes, in my opinion, you've got to run a company. It does not have to be a big company, a small company, whatever it is, but you've got to run a company in entirety to appreciate everything that's happening. Because if you're born a developer and you died a developer, you're going to be super ignorant about what it takes to actually sell software. I think it's important to learn marketing, sales, product management, business, customer service. Every single thing is important, right? So our journey has been
And
learning all these things.
yeah, and I think that's a great perspective. You got to think broad. And this is also actually one of the big reasons why I switched from technology to business, right? I was in technology. I was actually an Oracle database administrator working for Oracle Consulting in Atlanta. And I did that for a while. I was like, can't do this all my life. You know, I need a bigger perspective. So got an MBA from University of Michigan. And yeah, that definitely opens your mind to a lot more. Now, how are things working, right? How do businesses exist? How do they grow? Why do they fail? How should you think about customer needs? Uh, right? How should you operate? How can culture be copied? Yes, no. What's the answer? Those kind of things. I think those are important. Yeah.
Yeah. I have a couple of more questions for you, but anything else you want to ask me?
Yeah. So what's not working for you today in marketing?
Wow. I need 7 hours of your time, my friend, to share that, but I'll share the gist of what's not working, right? Um, so, when you're trying to debug a problem as an engineer, let's say I have a performance issue, right? Let's keep it simple. Let's say I'm going to a page, it's taking a bit of time to render, whatnot. As a developer or as an architect, you tend to look for this one big problem that you can find. By solving that one big problem, the page renders a whole lot faster and you're
Mm-hmm.
happy, right? Things are hunky dory.
Mm-hmm.
As a student, I would have expected that to happen. As a young graduate to work for a year or two, maybe I expected that to happen. But as somebody who's got plenty of gray hairs or whatever, right? I can tell you that my perspective has changed dramatically. You hardly ever find that single big problem. It's almost always death by 1,000 cuts, right? Which is the more painful, because now you can't fix one thing. You've got to find these 1,000 things and fix 1,000 things, right? That's one part of it. The second part of it is going back to the performance example. I've tuned a bunch in my lifetime when it comes to performance and scalability as well, right? If a page took 2 seconds to render or 3 seconds to render, if you tell me, Krish, can you make it faster, make it 3 to 2 seconds, it's going to be quite easy. 2 to 1 second, still a 50% improvement, right? But still not that difficult. Now, when you come to a sub-second, you come to 500 milliseconds, because I've actually had somebody tell me, Krish, this call is taking like 240 milliseconds or something, and we need to slice about 10% of it, right? That was the ask essentially. And I've done this, I'm not manufacturing this example. It was super difficult. I mean, you're talking 20 milliseconds here, right? It becomes really, really difficult. And I want to give that example there, Gaurav, is because I want to extrapolate that to marketing. As a company, I'm looking for this one big problem that we're not doing things correctly in this scenario, so we can go solve that, right? So ask everybody. Ask a lot of other people. And everyone has told me so far, no, Chris, you guys are writing articles, you're creating content, you're doing inbound stuff, you're doing prospecting for sales, you're doing podcasting, you're doing videos, short form, long form, you're doing TikTok or Instagram, right? So on the surface, we've not missed anything dramatically, at least. I'm sure we missed a bunch, but what I'm trying to say here is we've not like completely forgotten something. And I'm like, oh my God, please tell me I forgot something. Please tell me I forgot something, right? No, that's not the
You
case.
check the boxes. You're saying you
Yeah.
check the boxes, but it's not still not. It's something's not clicking.
Exactly, right? And that's
Yeah.
where it's a
So
death
so I
by
think I
thought.
think yeah.
Sorry.
So that's where I
Go.
think the outside in perspective might actually help someone who's been there, done that. And I think you still talk to people, but you're probably still looking for that. So I think you keep, if one looks keeps looking hard enough, you're gonna find it. You're gonna find
But
it. Maybe. Yeah.
and I will talk to you offline as well, right? So our
Yeah.
challenge has been, okay, we have a B2C product, a couple of them, right? We have a mobile app, we have a project management platform on the web, we have an education platform that's integrated into our mobile app, so that's a B2C product as well. And then we have the B2B product, which are APIs. So they're all different, completely different from each other, and they're sizable, right? They're not small apps, they're pretty big, and we are a small company, and we have to create content as well, right? Every time I go to create content, I'm thinking to myself, should I not be coding at this time? Because I'm a developer, right? That's just what I do, what I enjoy doing. But I can tell you in the last 6 months, I've done a lot less development than I've done in my entire life. That, it drives me nuts because I now find pleasure. Right? It's a luxury for me, right? I'm like, you know what? The next 4 hours, I'm going to time box to debugging problems. What used to be a little bit of a chore 5 years ago is now luxury for me, right? Being able to spend that time there. But the 4 hours I have to spend in creating content and writing something is become more of a chore, right? So it's kind of funny how life changes as you grow, older and whatnot, and as your interests change. But that's what I want to share. Hope some of
Yeah,
that makes some
I think
sense.
yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I think eventually at the end of the day, you want to keep working on interesting problems, and then find those, what are the next big rocks, right? That I would say, there's so many things to do in life and so many things to do to grow a business. What are the next three things that you should try to tackle, right? What are those next three things? That's it. And then you tackle those three, and then you find the next three. That's it. I think
Yeah.
that's a great way to actually just prioritize. There's
Very well said,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Any other questions?
No, I'm good. I think let's move on to the next leg.
Okay,
Yeah.
the last thing I want to ask you is education, right? Let's talk because a lot of people who are watching this or listening to it are also folks who are either in high school or college or graduating or young in the workforce and whatnot, right? So I want to get your thoughts here on the value of education. Now I'm going to give some background, right? Now you probably know a lot of this because we come from the same part of the world, Gaurav, but to the benefit of everybody else here. I'm going to say that, you said you grew up in north of India. I grew up in the south of India, but regardless, we come from the same beautiful country. Education was something that was told to us that it's the most important thing, right? I mean, it's the single most important thing. I mean, nobody asked me. My dad figured out that I loved playing table tennis after I turned 40, right? He was here and he's like, oh, I didn't know you played table tennis. I'm like, I've been playing for like 30 years, right? That's the level of engagement at least Indian parents at the time had, at least my parents did, right? So, but education was always important, right? Going to school, going to college. I mean, it's not even a question anybody asked you. You have to go to college. You have to go do your master's or take a plane, come to the US or go to IIM in India or something like that. But the point being, after spending 7.5 years in college, Gaurav, I enjoyed my time, sure. I made friends. I enjoyed the experience. But I want to take back a lot of those years if I have a choice, right? I would probably go to college for 2 years, maybe not more, right? I want to get the 5.5 years back. So the way I look at education, a diploma, a degree, whatever you want to call it, is radically different from how I did like 25 years ago. And I talk to people, we live in the US, college education is exorbitant here. It's super expensive. People borrow money. It takes 15 years to pay off your college tuition before you can spend on something else. So it's not again, it's to each their own. But the first question I want to ask you is, if Gaurav Verma graduated from high school yesterday, would Gaurav be enrolling in college today? Yes or no? And if it's yes, why? If it's no, why as well?
Um, if I were graduating from high school, I probably would have already vibe coded a bunch of apps, or at least I would have talked to my parents and figured out, okay, what do you really do? And I would
Gaurav,
have
sorry,
got,
I'm going to interrupt you for a second. Didn't
yeah.
mean to. Here is why. You started with vibe coding. That's part of the world we grew up in because you can either be a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer, right? There's no other professions apparently. But I came here, I recognize the value of wanting to be able to do what you want to do, not what you have to do. So if you could, vibe coding is fine, but if you could share a response with us that's generic and not specific to just engineering or medicine, that would be really appreciated.
Yeah, so I think given how things are going, I would still definitely enroll in college, right?
Okay.
Because I think and this is like me talking. So I feel education is still very, very important. It's that one thing that no one can take away from you, right? That's a bedrock in life. That's defines you as a person, defines your intelligence, defines your personality, and where you actually do it from also makes a difference, right? And which is why actually I personally, after coming to US and being on H1B visa for several years, I saved up enough so that I could go to a good college for business school. So I understand that. So coming out of high school, I would have done enough to build a profile so that I could apply to good colleges
But
and
you
good
still want,
programs.
but what you're saying, Gaurav,
I
is
would.
so you will spend the next 4 years going to college.
I would, but I would also maybe look at doing community college, I would say, and then maybe shave off a couple of years there. Um,
Why go to college? Let me rephrase my question.
oh, why go to
What are you going
college?
to what are you going to
No.
learn there?
Okay. Okay. So there's this question between homeschooling versus going to school. Why go to public school? Why go to private school? Just do homeschooling, right? So, and I know people who are part of a nonprofit that we go volunteer for. There are people who are very smart. They have done homeschooling. They're probably smarter than people who are going to school. But there's this aspect of being street smart. You cannot learn everything at home talking to your parents. You're not going to learn everything at your home. They can tell you something, a few things, a lot of things if you want to ask them. But a lot of things you just learn from your peer group, right? And
But
so
Gaurav, to
I
be
think,
specific, my question is not why you go to school. I agree
yeah,
that you can go up to high school, so you would
yeah.
still have those peers and learnings from your friends and
And so the
whatnot.
same
But
argument applies for college, right? So if you go to college, you're going to learn a lot from your peer group, and hopefully you're going to a college where there's the more people the more people who are much smarter than you, right?
but how would I be learning? And this is, I'm just playing the devil's advocate here, right? How would I? Why am I expecting to learn more about marketing by studying in a college for 4 years that relates to marketing, right? Let's say I have a marketing major, then working with Gaurav, because I strongly believe if I spend 4 years with Gaurav in the company, I'm going to learn a lot more about marketing
Yeah,
than this
and
other
then
person
so
who went to
right,
college.
and then so there are people who take the like the middle path, because I know of one person whose son went to Berkeley, and then after a couple semesters he's just working directly with founders, and then he's not sure if he's actually going to continue. So the environment or the college environment becomes a stepping stone. You go to becomes a stepping stone to for you to be in touch with the right set of people, so that you can learn the next life skills or the next set of business skills or the next skill of domain skills that you might want to spend the rest of your life or the next part of your life on, right? So but you can take that route, but most people probably don't take that route, right? So most people tend to complete the degree,
Is it
or they
cultural? I'm asking this as, is it
this is this
cultural?
is it is totally cultural, right? And then I mean you are the person that it is totally cultural, and it's also going to be dependent on which college you go to and what is the culture in that college. So one is it's ethnically cultural, right? Yes, you get some part of you like thinking from there that hey, you got to finish education, you got to have a undergrad and all that, and then think of something else. Second part is what influences you get from the your undergrad or business school, and then if you find something more interesting there, and that's what you want to do. But not everyone's like a college dropout and a very successful entrepreneur also, right? So I think eventually uh, you need a very good base, you need strong degree, and then you also need a very good alumni network. Why do people go to colleges? I think why do people want to go to good colleges? For good alumni network. so that they can actually go and tap on the shoulder for someone and say, hey, you know what, I'm part of here, a part of this network, go blue, or feed the tree or whatnot. And right, and then, hey, can you do this for me? How about we get together? And I think that, so that opens doors.
Okay. So for people who genuinely enjoy wanting to do it, yes. The last question I have related to that topic is a lot of times you talk to people or kids or parents and whatnot, everyone seems to be under a pressure cooker because you have a world that's growing in population. We are at 8 billion now. By the end of the century or before then, we're going to be, I think, around 11 billion. AI is able to do jobs one agent can do what 100 people can do or something roughly along those lines, and this is only going to improve, meaning there's going to be more people, probably a lot lesser things to do, which means it translates to more competition, which explains there are societies in the world where children are not particularly happy, right? The depression rates are very high. Everyone's under this pressure cooker, in the pressure cooker, right? I mean, they're not enjoying it. So do you have any thoughts on, I mean, do people pick college because they want to go, or do they do it because parents are expecting them to actually do it? And I speak to it very much so as an Indian parent and just having other friends who happen to come from the same part of the world. The culture seems to be pretty strong and predominant as to, hey, you know what, that is how what we're expecting you to do things. But that does not necessarily translate to children wanting to do it or being happy about it. Compared to when I came here, Gaurav, one of the things I first appreciated about America from day one was I saw that people were actually doing what they wanted to do, right or wrong, as opposed to what they were expected to do. And life comes a circle. 25 years later, I feel like a lot of that culture is lock, stock, and barrel here. So I want to just see if you have any thoughts there.
Yeah, I think when AI becomes extremely advanced, it's going to displace so much from the current society and the lifestyles that it's going to be. I mean, it's pretty much incomprehensible. Education will play a part to the extent that how successful can you be as a person still, right? So I think domain knowledge is going to be king, just as they say content is king or cash is king, right? I think domain knowledge is still going to be king because eventually, to earn money, you have to solve problems or you have to offer an experience, right? Let's say you built a spa, you're still solving a problem. You built a hotel, you're still solving a problem. You have a beach resort, you're still solving a problem. You have a restaurant, you're still solving a problem. What is that one problem you're going to solve? Or what are those multiple problems that you are interested in? So I think education can help you make a base there, and all that. And then I think it can also help you get you in touch with people who've been there, done that, who can give you frameworks, who can give you social networks. So I think these things are still going to be important.
Okay.
I'm not going to be like a 15-year baby, youngster, and then be able to do everything with AI unless I know what good looks like.
Okay. Very
What
well
does good
said,
look
right?
like? Right? What does good look like? That comes based on experience.
No, I think you said it beautifully. That brings us to the end of the podcast, really. But there's one last thing which we can or may not have to talk about. We're two Indian people here, two immigrants living in the US. You mentioned H1B, and it's a very, you Google that, there's going to be quite a number of articles there. I leave this to you. Do you want to talk about immigration? If you want to talk about it, we can have a chat about it. Otherwise, it's completely optional. It's a bonus. Just a genuine question to you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
Okay.
I can talk. Yeah.
Because there's only a few people who have not had a chance to talk to a lot of immigrants on the podcast, and I do get that opportunity. I try to touch upon this because it's a topic that's important, right? Much like education, much like AI, much like culture, I think immigration is an important topic for people who live here, at least in the US, for instance, right? So, just by way of quick background, the two of us are immigrants, but not everybody. A lot of people who are listening to the podcast don't most likely are not. So I want to speak to both sides of this. I want to hear your thoughts on both sides. I've spoken to it enough on my solo podcast as well. So I want to use this opportunity, Gaurav, to hear your thoughts on both sides. And what I mean by both sides is to play, just say if you have to speak for and against each of those sides, just to keep it fair and balanced, right? On one side, we came as an immigrant, right? Years ago, we went through a legal process, applied for all kinds of forms and applications, and then years go by, you become a legal resident of this beautiful country. And then you brought value to the country. You believe you brought value, and you see a lot of other people bring value as well. The richness of America is through the variety of people that come here from Africa, from Asia, from South Asia, Southeast Asia, from down under, from Europe, from Latin America, and everywhere else that I can think of, essentially, right? It's rich. The food is rich.
Mm-hmm.
The culture is rich. The experience is rich.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And, you say, okay, there's a lot of pros, right? Now, if you talk about the cons of it, right? Just to play the devil's advocate, to the side of the argument where people are like, hey, we are not pro immigration, and they have a lot of valid points as well. Now, there's legal versus illegal immigration. I'm just going to talk about legal immigration, right? Because that's the way the two of us have been here. So I just want to focus on legal immigration, not the other part so much. When you talk legal immigration, there is a question of jobs being quote unquote lost, right? Now, the argument these days can be you're losing more jobs to AI than to immigrants, possibly. But regardless, everybody who's on the plane coming here on an H1 visa, it costs $100,000 to file that paperwork because the idea was to reduce the number of people coming on that visa so people here can find jobs, like the citizens of the country can, or legal residents can find that employment. But that's a decent enough argument to be had because the idea behind immigration is it's not a privilege, right? It's not a right? It's a privilege, meaning you don't have to. I mean, there are countries in the world, Gaurav, where you possibly cannot even immigrate to. I mean, I know 10 of them that I can think of. So I'm eternally grateful to America for having a legal process that you can go through. So I don't deny when people pop up this question saying, hey, if people come here and take up the jobs, what happens to people that are here, right? So do we need those people coming from other countries? Are we not finding those people here? Are companies going through the legal process of genuinely looking for people here and only look for immigrants or hiring people from outside the country if they don't find those people? Or are they trying to get cheap labor by bringing people into the country, right? Not finding employment, giving employment to locals here. So you can see the pros and cons of both sides. I mean, I just want to lay down the basic, obvious tenets of this conversation. I want to hear your thoughts on either side of this.
I think all of those things that you said are true. Um, yes, there is a big desire from the rest of the, from a segment of the rest of the world to come to America because America is the land of dreams. Um, Obviously we've heard about the American dream, right? So that was also part of why I kind of landed up here as an IT worker, right? Working for an IT solutions company, Wipro Technologies, right? And so I think yes, as you mentioned, there are companies who are also kind of might be abusing that to an extent, right? I think that is not right, obviously. Abusing the local laws to kind of, fatten up their pockets or uh, at the expense of, I would say, the local residents. I wouldn't say any country would appreciate that, right? So, but at the same time, I think it is sort of happening. It's kind of become the norm, right? So, but at the same time, America does get a lot of benefit out of those IT workers, if we just choose IT, right? Because there's two things we export, right? Yeah, at least from India. One is the IT brain power, the other is CEOs, right? So, and so I think the country has a lot to gain, but it does have to be kept within like specific guardrails also. So that's that. Um, uh, you know, and so that way the local population is also not shortchanged for. Um, but at the same time, I think the government should make all kind of efforts to also upskill the indigenous population so that they have the right kind of skills as well, right? So eventually, it's going to be this healthy balance between both forces. And I think we have to kind of exist somewhere in that equilibrium.
Okay, fair point. Just a couple of other things to add to that, right? You mentioned CEOs. It's important, right? You see this in the news all the time. Here is my take on it, right? This is my personal take on it. So if you take, we talked a lot about AI, right, in this conversation, correct? I mean, it's hard to have a conversation these days, even have a dinner without talking about the impact of AI. So you talked about CEOs, right? Let's take a few examples. I mean, because people I genuinely love and actually I'm inspired by. Let's take Jensen Huang, right? Probably the most important CEO today, right? So he was born in Taiwan. You can take Dr. Lisa Su, my second favorite, if you will, who runs AMD. She was born in Taiwan.
Also a relative of Jensen
Also a
Huang.
relative, a cousin, right? A cousin of Jensen Huang, right? So an immigrant. The third major chip company, Broadcom, is also run by an immigrant, Hock Tan, who's from Malaysia, right? Penang in Malaysia. These, I would say, from an AI standpoint, the three most important companies, right? Nvidia and creating, I think Nvidia has like 90% of the GPU market share, and GPU is like 75% of the AI chip market share. So it's about 67% of the GPU market share goes to Nvidia. About another 3%, give or take, goes to, I think, AMD, so about 70% there, right? And then you talk about Broadcom, which does ASIC chips. I think ASIC is like 25% of the market share, and Broadcom has 60% of that market share, correct? That's 15%. So you're talking 85% of AI chips are made by these three companies, all three run by immigrants. Something to just keep in mind. Now you have, let's take a couple other companies that my favorites. Google, Alphabet's run by Sundar Pichai, comes from the same part of the world that we come from, particularly from part of the world I come from too, right? Specifically from Tamil Nadu. Satya Nadella runs Microsoft, for instance. A lot of these CEOs. So that's a usual example. People tell me, hey, there's these incredible CEOs who come from all of these places. No questions about that. But to play the devil's advocate, Gaurav, I'm not sure if Jensen Huang or Dr. Lisa Su or Sundar Pichai are a true, genuine reflection or representation of every legal immigrant who takes the plane to come to America, right? There's this Krish who comes as well, who's not a rock star, who's just an average developer. So I think while it's fair to take these incredible examples, it's a very small number of the actual number of people who come to this country. So I just want to call out for that fact, right? I don't disagree or deny anything there. I just want to say that when these conversations are had, they have to be had holistically, right? If there are 100 people coming or 1,000 people showing up here, and one of them happens to be Jensen Huang, the question really is about the other 999 people, right? Not about the one person,
Yeah,
for
I think the
instance.
question is what's a good representative sample? I think if you look at technology companies maybe as a specific segment that you want to focus on, so that's where probably a bunch of these immigrants maybe end up being in that technology segment. What is the percent of CEOs for successful companies who are immigrants? I think that would be a good question to ask.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it probably is a smaller number, but I think it's an important question, right? So I think fair point. I just want to add to that the whole story of
Yeah, so
what.
I totally agree with the way you're posing your devil's advocate question, but I think the real question has got to be unbiased, right? So how can we unbias it in the technology space, right, where the immigrants might in general do well, in the companies that are doing well, what is the percent of CEOs that are actually
No,
immigrants,
great point, right?
right? Yeah. So I think if you I think pose that question, there's probably some truth to the you will probably see a good trend there.
I think well said. So the very last point I have about immigration that I want to ask you is one of the guests on the podcast educated me about a word that I'd never heard of before. Fantastic word, acculturation, right? Acculturation. So I always knew assimilation, right? When you go to a place, a new country, you learn the way, law of that land, not the legal laws, but the unwritten laws as well. So you try to gel well. But acculturation, she had mentioned, I think Nikki, she had said, it's you not losing your identity, yet becoming part of that culture. So the
Oh,
last
wow.
thing I want to ask you, Gaurav, about this is a lot of the times when you talk to people who are the locals of the US, right, of the country, there's a very fair reason that they actually sometimes take offense to immigration, not for any other reason, but the fact that there is this tendency, sometimes to a large extent as well, where people come from their own places and they live life the exact same way that they might have lived their lives back from where they came from. Now, on
Hmm.
one side, there's not necessarily something wrong with that, but on the other side, when you're going to a country because you actually wanted to move to that country, it seems fair for the people of that place to expect you to learn the ways of that land, right? How do you talk? How do you, have a conversation? How do you, I don't know, behave in public and private and whatnot, right? I mean, do you see as immigration, as we have this conversation and chatter about immigration, does that bother you? And I ask this very specifically because if you Google Indians in civic sense, there's no dearth of articles that show up, and it bothers me, right? Because we are people who are representatives of our country that come here, and everybody is an ambassador of the place that they are coming from, right? You don't have to be like an Aishwarya Rai or somebody like this who becomes an ambassador of the country. Gaurav is representing the India as well. Krish is representing India in many ways, right? Unofficially. So, what are your thoughts on assimilation, and what are some things you might tell people who are immigrating that they could learn a thing or two from somebody who's lived here for a number of years?
As someone who has lived here for 22 years plus, when I drive back home and I'm actually at a signal, taking the exit back home, I still see people, I still see homeless people here, and they're not in pretty good shape. I see people living in tents. I see a lot of poverty here too. So uh, there's a lot of factors, there's a lot of stereotypes that people have probably about Indians, and Indians might also have about America. But I've seen a lot of those being shattered myself. And I'm like, how is this different from what I see back home? It's not, right? It's just at a different level. That's all. So yes, but at the same time, you are, people look at you and they're like, oh, this person is probably from this part of the world. Um, and then, so you obviously want to have a good, I think you should be a good citizen in general. You should try to be a good citizen, right? It's not about what is specifically, he or she specifically thinking about me. So there's a saying about do in Rome as the Romans do, but I think that is probably taking it to quite an extreme, right? So I remember this story where when the Persians actually came to India looking for shelter, the king of Jamnagar, in Gujarat, actually said, I think there was a story about he's actually sent back looking for shelter. He sent a big pot of milks, and there was no space there. And then the wise man of the Persian just put some sugar in it, right? And so that basically said, we can assimilate in this culture,
Right.
and um, so they actually got shelter, and he was the one who sheltered them from the assaulters back home. So my point is, even when the sugar went into the milk, it did not become, it didn't really change its nature, right? So there's going to be an intrinsic set of nature that you're going to have. I think it's okay to be part of the new surroundings, but are you obliged to change yourself just because you're in a new set of environments? I think that's going to depend a lot based on how strong your foundation was mentally or psychologically, and
I
what
think
was
that,
and what was
sorry.
your real identity. Who the hell are you, right? Like, who are you? Who am I, right? So I think you got, so I remember specifically the first 6 months I came to US, I was in a huge culture shock. It was a big culture shock for me. It was, because this was very different from it. Not to say that I was like very Indian guy and like hugely patriotic or whatnot. But yeah, yes, but it was a huge culture shock. And then eventually I found my way, right? So eventually you have to discover who you really are, like what values you stand for. I don't think it's a good idea for you to um, for anyone, I would say to just adopt the surrounding just because you do in Rome as the Romans do. I don't think that's a good idea.
I think you said it beautifully. Perfect. My last question to you, Gaurav, is say you're going to dinner, right? This is a customary. I ask this of all my guests. You're ordering food, right? What is your favorite choice? It doesn't have to be the same cuisine. You're going to order appetizer, entree, and dessert. It can be the same cuisine. It does not have to be. What would those three dishes be? You can only pick one from each of these categories, like one on appetizer, one entree, and one dessert.
Okay, for the appetizer, can I choose a drink? I think I would choose Jaljeera. That would
Okay, you're
be a
gonna have to
nice.
explain that. Sorry, because you whatever it is, please explain. Yep.
Okay, yeah, it's a tangy drink with lemon and kind of sugary as well. So
Okay,
I
so
would,
that's
I
a
would,
drink. I'm gonna still ask you for the appetizer. That's good to know, but you would still have to pick an appetizer.
yeah. So I usually like Indian food more. So I would pick, chaat papdi. That would be
Okay.
one. The For the entree, I think I would go for an Italian. There's gnocchi, the
Yeah, yeah.
GNOCCHI or whatever. What's the spelling? Whatever. I had it once and it was pretty amazing.
Okay.
And for the dessert, I'm probably going to settle for an ice cream. Um, Maybe a cassata ice cream.
Okay, so that's great. I will explain that to the extent I know. The ice cream is an Indian ice cream, right? I mean, I grew up eating that as well. I don't know. Maybe I'm sure you find it in Costco. I wouldn't be surprised Costco sells so much Indian stuff these days. The entree, I'm sure everybody understands. And then the appetizer is also one of my favorites. Actually, I like bel puri a bit more than the papdi, but that's, for folks who have not tried it. If you're going to an Indian restaurant, you want to pick like a North Indian restaurant, and you can find that in the appetizer section. You got to sometimes develop a taste. I've taken people, and my wife was actually Indian from Malaysia, and I had to explain these appetizers to her before she got used to them. But it's incredible, right? It's incredible. So yep, it's all a little bit on the sweeter side, but it's great. Gaurav, this is amazing, right? I'm going to give one more quick intro and have you have the closing comments here. Thank you so much for educating me on marketing, on consulting, on immigration as well. So a lot of different topics and all of the tools and technologies that relate to marketing, specifically inbound, but you also mentioned a number of things that related to outbound as well. We talked about AI, tools, hiring processes, what's changed. So a number of different topics that we've been able to cover in the last 90 minutes or so, right? Really appreciate your time, Gaurav. And again, by way of introduction, folks, we spoke to Gaurav Verma. Gaurav is the Chief Marketing Officer at Kanerika. Gaurav is a technologist and marketer. I'm going to include the links to both Gaurav's LinkedIn profile and Kanerika.com. So folks can definitely, check out, reach out to you and the company as well.
And I have an AI newsletter, so it comes out every fortnight. So there's a lot happening on the AI space. So do check it out. You can subscribe on my LinkedIn.
Okay, perfect. Yep. If it's on the LinkedIn, then I'll include that as well. That's all I
Thank you
have.
so much. Thank you. Thank
No
you.
closing comments, Gaurav? Any closing comments to our audience, and then just stay on the call after we are done. Just closing comments from you.
Yeah. So I think this was amazing. Thank you for the opportunity for letting me share, how I've evolved as a marketing person, as a leader, and what I've learned over the years. I think there's a lot more to be done, and a lot more to share actually on the leadership side. How to motivate people, getting things done. So I'm really glad I could share a few ideas.
Thank you. With that said, until next time. Thank you.